Hello, hello, everyone, and good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining me again for another episode of Magnifying HR Voices. I am your host, Julie Turney, and every week we are going to have conversations leading up until December 18th with amazing HR professionals on thought provoking topics that relate to us in the HR space. So today, my guest joining me is the amazing Lisa Dempsey. I met Lisa after being interviewed on her podcast, and we've just been great friends since then, having great conversations. And so I figured let's have an interesting conversation today about why it is important for HR professionals to think about going solo in their careers, what that takes, what it looks like, lessons learned, mistakes made, and why we leave the corporate space ultimately. When we think about that conversation that is going around lately about the great resignation, I think that it's really important for us to recognize that while the great resignation is happening amongst our key talent, it's also happening in the HR space. You have HR professionals leaving organizations as a result of their realization that the organization that they are with wasn't as great as they thought it would be, and they're looking to do something a little different. So, what does a career in consulting as an HR professional look like? So, Lisa and I are going to have that conversation. And of course, we always want you to join the conversation too. As always, I got to ask you, if you are here joining us today, how are you doing? Did you eat well this week? Did you sleep well? Are you taking care of your mind and taking care of yourself? Let me know in the comments. Also, let us know where you're joining from. Where are you from? Which part of the world are you participating in this conversation today? I see Marjolijn, I see Gary. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to bring Lisa on stage and we're going to kick off our conversation. Lisa!
Hi, Julie. Oh, I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you so much
Hey!
for inviting me to this conversation.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. It's so nice to have you here today. And I really want to thank you for, holding space and having this conversation with our audience today. I know this is one of those conversations that I think a lot of HR professionals think about, going solo, and they are struggling with, how do I make this work? And I'm so glad that you're here to kind of have this conversation with us. Let us know where you are, where you are at in your journey. I see for the very first time we have someone joining us from Paris. Oh my
Oh,
goodness! I see the UK
bonjour.
and Barbados in the house. Bonjour, ça va? Nice to meet you, Celia. I see Gary is here, Marjolijn is here. So I see UK in the house. I see Amsterdam in the house. So it's really great to have everyone here. Jolene from the UK is telling us that she's on top of her self care. I'm so
Ooh.
proud of you, Jolene. Well done. So, yes, Lisa, I am going to kick off the conversation by leaving you on the screen to tell everyone your HR origin story.
Thanks so much, Julie. Well, so my HR origin story actually started in the United States while I was going to university full time. I also worked full time because I didn't want to graduate with a massive amount of student debt. And I worked in people management. So it was HR, it was looking after a whole variety of things. Never in a million years thought that it would turn into a career because I was studying social systems psychology. So that's a really big holistic view of psychology. It's related to organizational psychology, but it gets much bigger than that. And then my life took a turn. I actually met a really wonderful Dutch man. We had a common interest in music. And after getting to know each other for a little bit less than a year, I guess, decided to pick up my life and move from the United States to the Netherlands. I'd always hoped that, my career, my life would take me abroad. Never expected that it would go this way. But it was wonderful. It was great. But it really genuinely forced me to reinvent myself when I landed in a new country where not only did I not have a professional network, none of the employers that I had worked for really were well known or recognized here, and I didn't speak the language. And then on top of that, my degree wasn't recognized. Literally, people would sort of scratch their head and go, "Social system psychology? What? You studied some biology and anthropology and sociology and history and physics and statistics and all these things." So I really had to reinvent myself, and that was when I went back to human resources. That was the most practical application of what it was that I had studied and that I knew that I loved. I loved people and understanding human behavior. And so I started doing that here in the Netherlands and very quickly worked my way up into working in a variety of really large multinational organizations, really doing international people strategy. So doing a lot of talent mobility, global mobility. Typically, I was the person who was sitting at the boardroom table, as the business would say, "This is our strategy and this is where we want to go." I would be the one saying, "Okay, this is what we need to get our people there. This is what's important for them." And then, yeah, decided to leave that space when literally I personally hit a brick wall. I had a burnout I think it was 2014. Literally hit the brick wall running 100 miles an hour, was working really, really hard on this very large global transformation project. And things went very badly for me personally, but also they were going very badly inside the business. Yeah. So why did I decide to leave the corporate world? A part of that really was I realized through my burnout that I was not getting what I needed. As I had climbed the proverbial corporate ladder and had, gained influence inside of organizations, I also was losing more and more touch with the people that I really loved. And I was getting much more involved in things that really didn't bring me the energy that I wanted. So through my burnout, I did a lot of really deep self-reflection about what was that about? What did I most long to do? And what was the impact that I most wanted to have? And then interestingly, when I went back into the business in the Netherlands, we have sick leave for burnout. I know not all countries have that. So I was very fortunate to be able to, be out on sick leave while my body physically recovered. And then when I went back into the business, I discovered that everyone that I had been working with prior to my burnout, they were also all gone. All of them had literally disappeared from the business in just a few short months. It was less than 6 months. Literally every single person that I was working with on the board was gone. Every single person in the HR department I was working in was gone. And they had all either gone out with their own burnout or had left very abruptly, literally almost overnight, which here in the Netherlands is highly unusual. Typically you have, a sizable notice period.
Right.
So that indicated to me that there was also something really toxic going on in the environment. And that made me take another step back and think, what was that?
Yeah.
And that was when it really became very clear to me that leadership, real leadership, not, do you have all your C-suite positions filled? Do you have, the right people in the right spot, the right CFO, the right CEO? But genuine leadership, people being able to act and behave as human leaders
Yeah.
was so important. And that was not happening in that business. And I knew that I wanted to take that on and challenge that. And that's why I've become a leadership coach and founded my company, Leadership Labs. And now the bottom line of what I do now is I am in the human development business as a coach because I believe in the power of people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the leadership business because I believe that every single human being is a leader in their own way. It's just a matter of whether or not you're doing it consciously or
Yeah.
unconsciously.
Yeah.
And I'm a coach because it is the most effective way that we know to evoke human change and transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Lisa. I really think that it's you mentioned so many things there that I wanna touch on because I feel like it's really important for us to kind of break it down a bit. But you mentioned something that's very similar, and this is why we have so much in common. Because you mentioned that you actually started to consider consulting as a result of your burnout. Um, your what were the circumstances that led up to? What do you think were the circumstances that led up to your burnout ultimately?
Well, so it was a combination of several things. Number one, I was going through my own personal transformation. My Dutch husband, who I had come to the Netherlands for, we were in the middle of getting a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
He was going through his own thing and a bit of a midlife crisis, and so we were getting divorced. So suddenly I found myself at home alone with very little traditional support. And then what was going on in the system of the organization that I was in was a tremendous amount of toxicity. There was a huge amount of toxicity. We were the first 6 months of the global transformation I was working to lead major parts of went incredibly well, went
Right.
very, very well. And then suddenly things started changing. Suddenly the psychological safety got sucked out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And what I know now in hindsight is that particular CEO was manipulating people on the
Mm-hmm.
board and was pitting people against one another and was forcing people to fight for territory in very dirty ways. And so
Wow.
suddenly the whole entire organization was at war and
Mm-hmm.
was in a fight for its own survival. Literally, people were fighting for their survival.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Incredibly toxic,
Yeah.
very, very, very toxic.
Mm-hmm. What made you decide to leave corporate altogether? Like, why not try to lead in another organization? What were some of the thoughts that you went through in that thought process of determining, okay, no, I don't want to go back in and work exclusively with another company. I'm going to fly solo and try this on my own. What was your thought process like?
Yeah, that's such a good question because when I started saying, well, I think I might want to become a coach, the response was almost ubiquitously like, oh, why would you want to do that? So many coaches out there. How are you going to distinguish yourself? How are you going to differentiate yourself? And I think for me, really, the reason that I wanted to go out and not only go into coaching, but I wanted to be external to organizations was I had worked within HR in a variety of really large international organizations, as well
Right.
as small organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that, particularly through the lens of leadership, that I observed was the moment you become an internal part of the fabric of the organization, you become much more susceptible to a lot of things like politics, to all of the pieces that, organizations have to try to sway your opinion, whether it be your compensation, whether it be your career path, whether it be opportunities that you are potentially given to do interesting projects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just really didn't want to. I knew what I wanted to be changing inside of organizations, and I didn't want to be tangled up in those kinds of influence. I wanted to work with organizations and work from that very clean slate of right.
Yeah.
If you find leadership important, let's talk about that in a really authentic way and not have my salary and my bonus and my career progression tied to whether or not they were going to participate, in a healthy, productive way or not.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's something that's really crucial when you think about making that step, going through that thought process of, what are the pros and cons of me staying and trying another organization versus me going to fly solo and do something differently. I know, like, sometimes when I talk to people, especially because I coach HR professionals, it's a conversation and a question I ask them all the time. If you're deciding what do you want to do? If you're at that career crossroads, what do you want to do? Do you want to fly solo? Do you want to progress your future and your career in another organization, and what does that look like for you? And sometimes I get some professionals who go, well, okay, I know I can't do the consultant thing. No, I question that sometimes too, because I think that's a limiting belief. But if you say my preference is not to consult and my preference is to go into an organization and find the right organization for me, that's a whole different story. That's you saying that's your preference. Your preference is to work with a company, versus don't tell me about the coach. Don't tell me about consulting. I don't want to do that. Like, that's not for me. Okay, how did you determine that? So I think that that's a really key step in figuring that out. What does your organization like? Tracy is saying, I want it all.
Don't we all? Don't we all? Well, and I
think
just want to say something about that, Julie, because one thing that I do recognize is I see that as well in my coaching business. Some people who are they want to make a change, but they're hesitant to make that step out on their own. Sometimes it has less to do with limiting beliefs and more to do about practicalities. Money. How am I going to make enough money? And so, sometimes there is the need to either do something a little bit of a hybrid model, or to take on a job that that you're going to do for X amount of time, and then set yourself some very serious, strict financial goals. I want to save X amount of my salary so that I can build up a buffer. I have a buffer to be able to float me for X number of months or years. So that you have the breathing room, because that is one thing about stepping out on your own. It's really important to build yourself that breathing room, because it is not like a faucet. You don't just, hang your shingle out and say, here I am, and turn on the tap and everything starts flowing in.
So,
and I think that, for some people that is a legitimate reason to consider what path, what side road can they potentially take to get there.
yeah, I see Jolene is saying that she's still working full time as HR, but she's also consulting and transitioning. So that's a interesting one, Jolene. Thank you so much for sharing. Still think you're transitioning out of HR. I'd be curious to have that conversation with you later down, but I know a conversation with you is coming, Miss Jolene. I know it is. So in continuing to talk about, the advice that you would give to HR professionals who are thinking about going solo, or like Tracy, want it all, I think that's really good advice. And I always remember one of my dear friends, Eric Kershaw, giving that same advice about going solo, making sure that you have some kind of savings there to help you as a buffer. I think a lot of times when people get into being a consultant, and if you decide to be a coach, you get the same question that you got, which is what's going to separate you? What's going to differentiate you from everybody else? What's going to make you stand out above everybody else? And I remember one of my friends, Ron Johnson, asking me that question when I started HR at Heart. And he was like, Julie, what's going to make you stand out from everybody else? And I just thought like this was something in me that I wanted to do. And I never thought about standing out. I never thought about other people doing what I do, because as far as I've always been concerned, it's like no one does what I do the way I do it. Right? So
Absolutely.
you have to have that confidence in yourself. What other things do you think go with that, Lisa?
Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's having that confidence, knowing that whatever it is that you bring it in a very unique way. So even though, I know there are tens of thousands of other people who call themselves leadership coaches, I am the only one who brings my very specific perspective, my very specific way, my own energy, my own story to that space. So really grounding yourself in that confidence of your unique gifts. And then the other thing is, I think taking that step back to really think about who are you and what do you need to nourish inside of yourself in order to be the best person you can be. What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you're not going to be able to build a sustainable business if it doesn't nourish you. If you
Yeah.
do not get that sense of fulfillment, if you do not get that energy, if you don't get that, excitement, and it doesn't mean that everything about it is exciting. I file my taxes just like everybody else, and I pull my hair out just like everybody else. I do not love it, but I do it because I know that if I don't, I get in trouble and I don't get to work with the clients that I love working with.
Yeah.
So, really taking that time to really lean back, take
Yeah.
that step back and reflect, what do I really love? What brings me energy? Who are the people that I get excited to work with? What are the things that, like make my fingers tingle and I can't wait to get dug into? That,
Yes.
do those things.
Yes, I so totally agree with you on that because, and I love when you said what makes your fingers tingle. I always say, like, what makes your heart sing? When you're doing something and you love it so much, it makes your heart sing. You feel like, yes, this is what I should be doing. This is where I need to be. And just being in that space. And so, like, back to that question that you said you were asked and that I was asked, like, what differentiates you? What makes you different? What makes you stand out from everybody else? And if you know what that is, then that's when you know, okay, go forward and do just that, just exactly that. So while there are hundreds of thousands of coaches out there, what makes us different? What makes us unique? What makes you unique? And what is your why? And understanding your why. And I think that birth from burnout, toxicity and burnout adds to that. But then that's part of your why, and you don't want that for other people. That's why I coach HR professionals specifically, because I understand HR people. I get where they're coming from. When I hear those toxicity stories, I can relate to it. When I hear those stories about the difficulties and the pains that you're experiencing with employees, the vicarious trauma that you're holding based on different situations, I've been there. I can totally relate to that. So when I talk to HR professionals and they go, I've had so many people go, thank you for seeing me. When someone says that to me, thank you for seeing me, that for me is how I measure success. When I have dealt with a client who said, I've seen them, I've heard them, and I've seen them. What does it for you, Lisa? What does that for you?
Well, what I most really love is engaging with individuals and teams, and at times even whole entire organizations, and helping them figure out who they really are. Who they meant to be, and how can they bring about their most true, authentic self-expression.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to see people when they go from this kind of lost, like, where do I go and what advice do I follow and how do I fix this, and like they're sort of grasping at straws, to suddenly being really rooted and grounded in, this is the truth of me,
Yeah, yeah.
this is
That's
who I am. And
beautiful.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
beautiful. I love that. Let me ask
And
you this. Mhm,
oh,
go
I
ahead.
just want to say, I'm seeing Jolene is saying, find your
Yes,
purpose. So big
purpose.
yes to that, Jolene. And pay attention to what brings you energy, because your purpose is sort of like that northern star that helps guide you towards the right constellation. The path to it is energy.
Yeah,
Follow what brings you energy, because there
energy.
are lots of different ways to get there, right? Many
Uh,
roads lead to Rome. Take the one that brings you the most energy.
yes, yes. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Let me ask you our next question. What were some of the hard lessons that you learned as you started your journey, entered your journey into becoming a consultant?
Yeah, I think for me, I've been, touch wood, I've been very blessed in that I haven't had many. A lot of that comes from the fact that I did have a lot of experience, business experience coming into this. I was in professional HR for more than 20 years. But really, I think some of the most surprising lessons have been, um, really the amount of time that it needs and requires to be able to start telling your story in an authentic way that resonates with people. right? Because I think that's also a really important thing as well, especially if you're in a purpose-driven business.
Yeah.
That authentic story is so important because
Yeah.
it's not about, yes, you want to have some marketing, you want to have, pipelines and things like that, but it's not all about that, right? You're not building this big machine. This is not about production. We're not, trying to stamp out 1,000 pieces every hour of whatever it is that you want to be doing.
Yeah.
And particularly in the people space, right? If you're coming out of the HR, sorry, just one second. My doorbell has just rung.
There goes the dog.
There goes the dog. Just one second. Yeah. So, you don't want to be, if you're coming out of the HR space, you're probably not wanting to go into a highly transactional area, right? You've probably been in HR because you enjoy working with people. You get energy from working with people. Follow that. Follow
Right.
that. Do not try to go down that path of, cookie cutter, let's build massive pipelines and get a bazillion people on board. So
Right.
for me, it took me a really long time to figure out how to tell my story in an authentic way that then also people could understand what the heck I was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember going to a networking meeting once and saying, hey, so yeah, I'm Lisa. It's really nice to meet you. I'm a leadership coach. And number one, the guy went, oh, you're like the 10th coach that I've met tonight. What is it with all these people who are coaches? And then he proceeded to sort of put on this armor of, oh, and leaders, I'm a great leader. Let me tell you all about the wonderful things that I've done and da 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 da. Remember when I was really put off by that? But what I would be able to do much better now is circle back around and ask some of those powerful questions rather than just being purely put off by him.
Yeah.
But it takes time. It takes time to cultivate that story. Give
Yeah.
yourself time to find your way, your words, and the people that you want to be engaging with. Because
Hmm.
it does not happen overnight.
No, no. And you touched on such a really great point there just now, which I think a lot of people, especially, I think it's one of the lessons learned for me as well, is that when you are developing a client base, you can't just take people for the sake of you. You've got to feed yourself and pay the bills. What's your advice on choosing clients?
Follow the resonance. Work with the clients that, again, you're excited to work with, and that working with them, the amount of energy you put into them, you're going to get a return on investment on that energy.
Hmm.
Pay attention to that. Work with the people that you love to work with. Do not go back into that sort of, corporate mindset of doing it just to get that money in.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's going to rob your soul. That
Hmm.
it's going to take you out of fulfillment, and it is going to make you very unhappy. This is part of the reason why you're taking this bold step. Don't let yourself get lulled back into that, but I've got to do it.
Yeah, because there's so much more, and you find so much more peace when you are working with the people that you really want to work with. I think it's really important to understand what your client persona looks like, and then working to find those people. That's where you get the most rewards. I find it the most rewarding when you're working with the people that you like. So that's really great advice. When it comes to tech and getting your consultancy organized, what does your tech stack look like? What are your recommendations for creating a robust tech stack that makes sense?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question because I think so many people, they underestimate the possibilities that exist within technology.
Hmm.
There's so much out there that's available. But also, I sort of talk about it. I look at technology very much like the iPhone. You want it to be simple and useful. So do
Hmm.
not overcomplicate it. You do not need to automate everything. There's a lot that you can get done with just, Word or Excel. I still do my invoicing in Excel because
Okay.
it works for me. It's something that I was good enough with Excel that I have enough things that are automated in it, very, very easy. So look at, my advice for anybody looking to set up their own practice is really look at what are the things that that you can do and you don't need technology support in. Continue doing those things on your own. Look at the things that you really hate doing and that you want to automate. Find something out there that's going to automate it. I can guarantee you it exists, and there's probably some free version of it out there. And then look at what it is that you want to outsource, the things that you also just really don't like, or you don't have even enough interest to pay someone to do it for you. Save yourself that effort, because you do not want to be sitting with your fingers in your hair every single day. And, so for me, that looks like I hate scheduling appointments. I absolutely despise it. So I just have a software that does it. I have a link that I send to people.
Yep.
They book the time. It takes care of all of the time zones. I work with people in more than 47 different countries.
Yep.
So rather than having that constant, back and forth about, oh, what time zone are you in? And here's the link. Find your time. Good luck. I'll see you.
Exactly. I agree with you. I do that as well. I actually use Calendly, and I find that works really well for me in terms of people being able to book their times. And I just, like you said, send them the link. You get that out of the way instead of you doing all this back and forth on emails or on LinkedIn in the messaging. It does get a bit tiresome. So if you can just cancel that. But there are lots of other calendar software options that you can use. Calendly works for me. Let's talk a little bit about social media. And getting your name out there. What are some of the things that you can do to market your coaching business, whether on social media? What social media platforms do you use? Do you find most effective, and the recommendations you would make?
Yeah, so for me personally, what I find to be most effective are, of course, LinkedIn, which is why we are here on LinkedIn.
Yes, absolutely.
And then also Facebook. Facebook is the place where I found the majority of people that were kind of in the sphere that I was most looking to connect with.
Okay.
And it, really, for me, the key to social media is, again, authentic messaging. I work really hard to just simply turn up as myself. When I post something, when I put something out there, it's not about, oh, who's going to read it and what message do I think they need to be getting from it and what's that big call to action, which I know drives a lot of marketing people crazy. I've had some marketing people work with me who are like, no, you have to stop doing this. People like, no, you need to have a call to action, you need to have a plan, you need to have a calendar. I'm like, no, that's not me. That's not way. I'm a little bit more organic than that. And it's amazing, just simply by turning up on social media, having an opinion, putting a stake in the ground and saying things like, I believe this is important. And whether it be about your own messaging or just even commenting on somebody else's piece. Recently there was Brene Brown had put out a podcast about racism and white privilege. And there was a whole lot of toxicity going on in the thread. And, I just took a really strong stand on some things and shared my ideas, shared my opinion. Got some, nastiness thrown back at me, but there were also a lot of people who connected with me afterwards and said, I really love what you had to say. I thought that was so interesting and so important. And what's really interesting to me is actually the majority of the clients that I get from social media, it's not because they've interacted with some social media campaign that I've done or some series of blogs or posts that I've put up. It's usually been because I've been interacting with some topic that actually has nothing to do with what my business sells. It has to do with how I think and how I show up, and that's what they're attracted to, and that's what they want to work with.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I remember some time back listening to Gary Vaynerchuk talking about, the importance of living in comments and participating in conversations and why that's important. That's what people pull to, that's what people resonate with. And that stuck with me. So no matter what platform I'm on, I'm always looking at what other people are talking about and sharing in those conversations. And I've always found that just true to what you said, that you will find people who engage with you and do business with you because of something else that you've commented on, because they know, oh, there's more to her than just what she talks about or what she posts about on social
Right.
media.
Yeah. If I'm constantly trying to pitch leadership labs, like, oh, it's so exciting and da 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 da, like, no, sorry, people get like, that's not fun or
Yeah.
exciting for anybody. When
No.
I turn up for who I really am and take a stand for the things that I really want to, diversity and inclusion is a huge thing, because one of my core leadership values is all about inclusivity.
Yeah.
So I'm very active in anti-racism. I'm very active in those sorts of things. And
Mm-hmm.
you may not always make that direct one-on-one correlation. People pay attention. People
Yes.
say, yeah, I want
Mm-hmm.
that kind of person with that mindset.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing these thoughts. I think that a lot of people are appreciating. I'm seeing the likes, I'm seeing the celebrations, I'm seeing people reacting to what we're talking about, and that's really great. And I want to thank everyone for being a part of the conversation as well. I want to ask you this question before we move on from lessons learned. In terms of, as a coach, as a consultant, is your time with a client ever really over?
Ooh, I love that question. you know, so there are two answers to that. The first is, always when I go in as a coach, a part of coaching is all about empowering people. So I see it very much as my job to empower people as much as I possibly can. So my number one goal is to help somebody really dig down deep, find the leader within, and become, self-sustaining as quickly as possible. So that means I'm actually always working to put myself out of that job as quickly as possible. Now, the nice thing about life, though, is that we are all a work in progress. And so what
Absolutely.
happens time and time again is people go through that cycle with me. It's typically 6 months, 9 months. We close that chapter of the book. They go on to write the next chapter. And then eventually there's a chapter that comes in their life where they come back.
Yeah.
They come back. There's some sort of turbulence. There's some
Mm-hmm.
sort of something, that stretch that they got from that first piece of growth. It's reached its boundaries. So we're going to go in and dig and find a little bit more resilience and elasticity and move on from then. So, does it ever fully end? Probably not.
No.
But it is also not the case where, I do not want to be seeing a client every single week for like 12 years. Like, then
Yeah.
I am not doing a good job.
You want people to be able to grow and move on. But there's always knowing that you are the safe haven and that they can come back and they can run things by you. I think that that's really important. And so, yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. So thank you so much for sharing that. Question: what would you have done differently knowing what you know now? Whether that's from a, let's first talk about from an HR perspective and working in corporate HR. Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? Would you have sought the assistance of a coach, a therapist, and gone back into corporate HR? Would you have still continued to create what you're creating in leadership labs? What would you have done differently?
Yeah, well, so if we stick just for a moment just with, within corporate HR,
Mm-hmm.
what I would have done differently, I think inside of HR, what I would have done from that internal perspective differently would have been done a better job of screening the organizations that I was working with. There I had a very good sense. I remember once I was leaving one role. I knew that I wanted to leave it, but was looking for that next thing. And I remember sitting in the lobby, this big, beautiful glass lobby of this very shiny, beautiful building, waiting for the global head of HR to come down and interview me. And I picked up the company in-house magazine that was sitting on the table, all beautifully displayed. And there was this interview with this person. And I thought, oh, how fantastic. I can read all about him before I meet him. And in this interview, he had basically described a lot of administrative things that were going on within HR, and then literally closed the interview by saying, okay, that's enough from me now. I'm going to go back to my back office and basically disappear. I knew from that very moment that I was not going to, no matter what happened in that interview, I was not going to be working for that company.
Yeah, yeah.
I usually had a pretty good sense about things, but really making sure I would never ever want to work in an HR position in any organization where HR did not have a seat at the boardroom table, where HR was not a part of strategic conversations and a part of strategic decision making. So any HR group where it's just the back office and just a bunch of orders are handed to you, no way, no way. Stay away from those organizations. And really pay attention to the engagement of the people. That is incredibly important when people either start leaving, you're talking about the Great Resignation.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a huge sign.
Oh, yes. When your HR people are leaving, you should be asking questions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And do not be afraid to ask those questions. If there's a problem with you asking those questions, you're in the wrong place. You need to move on. Yeah. So that's what I wish that I knew better. I think I probably tried to persevere. I had a little bit too much optimism of like, well, it'll be okay. There's no problem. There's only opportunity, I think I had way too much of that.
Somewhere over the rainbow. Where is that rainbow? Kind of thing. Yeah. You raised some really important things there. And for anyone on the live today or who picks up the replay, if they've made a decision that they want to continue to work in corporate HR and they're job seeking, what question would you say would be the one question if they ask nothing else in the interview? What should they ask?
Why do you love your employees? Ask that to anybody in HR, and they better have a really good answer to it. If they don't, you do not want to be there.
Yeah.
Why do you love your employees?
I love that question. I'm going to add that to my pool of questions. That's a really, really great question. I've always felt like when we are being interviewed as HR, and when we're on the other side of the table being interviewed versus the one asking the questions, when you're going in for a HR role, it's really important to understand what the people look like, who they look like, what do they feel like, what does the culture feel like, and to ask those questions. It's one thing to ask, like, why did the previous HR person leave? But that's just part of it. Like, you want to know, as you said before, you want to know that HR has a seat at the table. You want to know that HR is making an impact. You want to know that HR really is in touch with the people and not standoffish. Anything outside of that is not where you want to be. If you want to create great people experiences, you don't want to be caught up in the admin of it all, because a lot of those things can be automated, can be dealt with in other ways. I got to ask you this, Lisa, then. What does the future of HR look like for you? And that's 2030 and beyond. What does the future of HR look like for you? Because I think what people predicted for 2030 kind of spiraled and happened because of COVID. So what does the future of HR look like now? Because it's changed.
Yeah, and hopefully a lot of it has changed for the better. I
Mm-hmm.
think COVID has taught us that hybrid working is very possible, that working from home, is very possible, that giving people more freedom and autonomy can be a really good thing. Um, you know, One of my hopes is that HR will stop being this back office function that it is in so many places. That really HR will learn how to be much more dynamic. That it is not this analog task of managing the employee life cycle, the ins and the outs. Um, and I think in order to do that, HR really requires a total revamp, to genuinely rethink everything about how they have been approaching engagement with business, engagement with the employees, and engagement with their own priorities. I think one of the things, and Julie, I think you and I talked about this in the HR Matters podcast, is HR people are overwhelmed 100% of the time, right? There is always far more work for
Oh,
HR people to do than they can get done in any day.
mm-hmm.
And so few people in HR are empowered to make intelligent decisions about that. And so few people are empowered to be able to say, no, I understand this is a problem for you, but you know what? In this bigger picture, this whole entire large organization, this system of human beings that we are tasked to take care of, that one has to wait.
Yeah.
And I think that that really needs to shift and change. And whether that means, actually getting rid of HR as an in-house department altogether and outsourcing it to people who have a little bit more freedom and autonomy to be able to hold boundaries in ways that I find internal HR departments often struggle to. Really, a lot of internal HR people struggle so much with boundaries because they're afraid of the backlash. They're afraid of all of those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean HR gets entirely outsourced and you bring in a group of, project professionals who just deal with whatever challenge is on at the moment? Is it restructuring? Is it, looking at job grading? Is it looking at engagement? I don't know, but I know that HR needs to be completely rethought.
Yeah. I am so on board with you with that, and I think some of our audience are commenting and agreeing with you. Gail says, "Agree with a total revamp of HR. Sometimes being relegated per se to the back office is due to the tons and tons of admin pushing paperwork that we're forced to do." And she's sighing about it too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And stop it. HR is not about paperwork. People that you can do one-click contracts. There's absolutely no reason that people need to be buried in contracts and admin and all of that sort of stuff. That
Yeah,
is not the value HR brings.
no, no, definitely not. We are people. We are about the people. This is a conversation that I bring up all the time about whether HR should be renamed people experience. Because at the end of the day, we are not human resources, we're not cattle herders. We're dealing with human beings. We ourselves are human beings, and every day we create experiences. And so I feel like a conversation needs to be had about auditing HR. Like, I feel it's really important. All of these organizations sit everywhere globally, whether it's CIPD or SHRM. Just really seriously thinking about bringing everyone together and saying, look, HR is broken. An HR generalist can only do so much, can never do everything that they're supposed to do on the job on any given day. It's impossible. Something will get dropped. That doesn't mean that the person is a good HR professional with a potential of being a great HR professional. You're just asking too much of one person. And as you talk about the future of work now and then becoming more analytical, more strategic, looking at working from home frameworks and competency frameworks and changing all of that up. In many organizations, you have about 40 people doing different things across that spectrum that you call people experience. But in most organizations, you have maybe one or two people. What is that true ratio? of HR to people?
Yeah.
Is it fairly distributed in every organization? And if it's not, how do we make that happen? How do we hold leaders accountable for making sure that their HR people don't break down because they're just doing way too much?
Right.
And I think those are conversations that really need to be had going forward. Are we going to spearhead those conversations, Lisa? Like, I feel like,
I hope so. I hope so. I hope somebody out there listening today is thinking, oh my gosh, yes, we need to be thinking about this and,
yeah,
reach out to have a conversation because the change has to start from within, right?
absolutely.
The change really has to start from within. It's not going to happen without people, for years. I think the other thing that I observe within HR is within most businesses, I won't say all, but a lot of businesses, the business itself is really frustrated with HR. I know typically when I would be hired and I would be hired under the umbrella of HR, people at first, there was a lot of resistance. They wanted to, they did not want to engage because I thought, oh God, here comes that person who's just going to talk to me about annual performance reviews and paperwork that I just have no interest in, the internet, and there's a new policy, and like, oh my God, get her away from me. And suddenly, I'm having very different conversations with them about their business, their strategy, what do they need, and they engage. The businesses are really hungry for this. They want people with our skills.
Yes, they
They
do.
want people who understand the human beings in their teams when they're stuck going, I don't understand why we have all these people and we can't get this stuff down. They
Yeah.
want the person to come and help make sense of that and say, well, you have a skills gap. You have something else going on. You're asking the wrong question about the wrong problem.
Yeah.
They want that, but you have to create space for yourself to engage in those conversations.
Absolutely.
Nobody is going to do that for you.
No, no. That's something that we really have to do for ourselves. And I really want to thank you for championing that and spearheading that. Started that discussion. And I hope that our audience is thinking seriously about that as they go forward. Tell us a little bit. Tell us about your company. Where can people find you, interact with you, do business with you, and also, before I forget, you also have a podcast show. So tell us a little bit about your podcast and how people can listen to that as well.
Yeah. So the podcast is called HR Matters, and I do that together with an absolutely fabulous woman called Marjolijn Vlug. We co-host the show, and we interview all sorts of wonderful people, such as Julie. And we have just really fun, casual conversations about HR. What are the important things going on related to people inside of organizations? So you can find the HR Matters podcast pretty much on any platform that you can find podcasts on. So we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, Google, Stitcher, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then my business is called Leadership Labs. That's Leadership Labs with an S.eu. Even though I'm based here in the Netherlands. I'm joining today from Haarlem, the original Haarlem in the Netherlands. Um, I work with people around the globe. So I genuinely, the only continent that I don't have clients on is Antarctica. So literally engage with people and teams around the globe. Thanks to remote working, thanks to the wonders of modern technology. And really, again, the core of my business is about helping individuals, teams, and entire organizations really better understand who they are and awaken that leader within. And leadership, it is not about power, it is not about title, it is not about your salary or what kind of car you drive. It is about how you authentically show up, bring your best self, and navigate the complexity and the craziness of this world in your most authentic way. When you can do that, when you can learn to stand tall in your own truth of who you are, suddenly all that complication that wants to drag you in a million different directions,
Goes away.
it melts away.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make it non-existent. It just doesn't bother you anymore. It doesn't get inside and eat you up. Suddenly it's just, here's my Northern Star. This is what I need. And life becomes so much more fulfilling when you're coming from that space of authentic leadership.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Any final comments, any recommendations you want to make to our audience? We've learned so much from you already. Anything else you want to add?
I think just wherever you are in the world, continue searching for the things that bring you fulfillment. Do not give up. Continue refining, redefining, keep on searching for your true, authentic purpose, your true, authentic self expression. You will find it out there.
Absolutely. I think that that's a great way to close off our conversation today. I tell you, an hour goes by so quickly.
I know. Whoosh.
Every single time. And this audience that we have here, absolutely amazing. I'm so grateful to you guys for always being here, showing up, sharing your thoughts, sharing your comments, interacting with my guests. Lisa Dempsey, I appreciate you so much. And I know that this is not the end. We will meet again and we will have conversations again. Okay, guys. So, coming up next week, are you ready? Are you ready for next week? And who is coming to the table next week? Next week, my guest is Shireen Daniels, the HR conversationalist, the advocate for anti racism in the workplace. And Shireen and I are going to have a very serious conversation next week about how HR advocates for anti racism in the workplace and why she has chosen to take up this cause. If you are not following Shireen Daniels, you must be under a rock. She's absolutely fabulous. She's everywhere. Her show is HR Rewired, and I first found it on YouTube. And then I started to follow her on LinkedIn. She is a powerhouse. I don't know if I'm ready to have this conversation with Shireen next week, but I'm going to make myself ready. So she's going to join us next week for that conversation on advocating for anti-racism in the workplace. Bring your questions, bring your A game. I'm sure Shireen is looking forward to seeing you and having you be a part of that conversation. Do you want to join the conversation? Then connect with me here on LinkedIn. Send me a message. Let me know what you want to talk about. What do you think I'm missing from this conversation? Remember, this is Magnifying HR Voices. This is not about my voice. This is about your voice as HR professionals and what you bring to the table. So please reach out. Let me know. I'm always happy to have you be a part of the conversation. And last but not least, it'd be remiss of me not to talk about Confessions of an HR Pro, Stories of Defeat and Triumph. If you do not have your copy, please go check it out. I would appreciate your support. The book is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle version. So please check us out. And with that being said, we have reached the end of our show for today. Thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to magnifying another HR voice with you next week. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.